Hello again. I'm here to show you the basic configuration of static NAT. So we all know the concept of the NAT protocol, how it conserves and preserves the IPv4 addresses. So let me show you the packet tracer activity 9.2.1.4 from your CCNA account. So I have here the topology. So looking at the topology, it says there is these two computers, PC1 and L1, connected to the internet. And inside the internet, there is somewhere out there, there is a server, okay, with an inside address of 172.16.16.1. Now, let's look at the instructions and the steps they want us to do for you to be, for us to be exposed with how NAT works and do the basic configuration. So step 1 says from PC1 or L1, attempt to connect to server 1 web page at 172.16.16.1. Of course, we all know that this is a private IP address. Use the web browser to browse server 172.16.1. The attempt should fail. So let's try to do it here. Okay, desktop and then the web browser. I'll paste the IP address. Let's wait. Of course, it should fail. Okay, request timeout. Then the same is true with this one, of course. So just for us to be able to see it, let's do it there. So it should fail. Now, if you're going to look at the topology, of course, this is supposed to be converged already. The one that connects the server to the internet is R1. And since we all know that PC1 is already connected to the internet, PC1 should be able to reach the address of R1. Okay. So step 1B, um, asks us to ping S00 interface of R1. So you can do a lot of ways to check the IP address. Maybe you just hover your mouse on this router and then you can already see there that S000 is configured with an IP address of 209.165.128.130. Or maybe you would want to go to CLI and check the configuration yourself. So it's up to you. So you all know that the S000's IP address is .130. So let's try to ping it here, command prompt, and then let's try to ping 209.165.128.130. So it shows that this computer can already access the router there. So ping 209.165.128.130. Same is true with this one. So it shows that there's really a connection in here. The only problem is this server, of course, the 172.16.1 is not yet mapped in the topology so that when this computer wants to access the server, it should be able to do so by, let's say, if this server is should have an outside IP of 64.100.50.1. Whenever PC1 access the 64.100.50.1, it should be able to show the server's web page, something like that, instead of the 172.16.16 private IP. So looking at the network, the topology already shows that if this is the router and we want an inside address, okay, an inside address to be mapped outside here for people to see them or for other computers to see them, then this router here with a G00 configured to have 172.16.16.14 should already have the configuration uh, for the interface as the inside, okay, and then on the other side the serial 000 will be the outside. But let's do that later. Okay. So let's go to step number 2. So view R1 routing table and running configuration. So note that there are no commands referring to NAT. So enable, then show run there. G00 is not yet configured to have NAT, and the same is true with S00. So down here on at the very end, there's no entry yet for a NAT. Okay, so let's continue. Verify that the routing table does not contain entries referring to IP addresses used by PC1 and L1. So just show IP root. Then we all know that we already can see here that there is this 172.16.14 and 209.165.128.30 as just directly connected. Verify that NAT is not being used by R1. So let's check the translation. Show IP NAT translation. Okay, no entry yet. Okay, meaning nothing used any translation yet in this router. Okay, so we're done with part 1. Let's go to part 2. We want to configure static NAT. So how do we configure static NAT? So there are actually 3 steps. First, we need to do the mapping and configure the interfaces to be inside or outside. Or you can do vice versa, configure the interfaces first, if it's inside and outside, and then do the mapping. So let's, either way, anything we'll do, let's start with R1. So enable, configure, enable, then configure terminal. So let's do let's just configure the IP NAT IP. I'll use question mark so you can see the different options. IP NAT, and then it will ask you if it's just inside or outside. So it's an inside mapping. So inside, and then source will be static. Okay, static, and then it will ask you for the IP addresses. So 172 dot 16.16.1, I think, the server there. So that one will be mapped to a global IP of 64.100.50.1. Okay, that's it. So let's interface G000 and let's check. I think it's just G00. Okay, so interface G00, and then let's just specify that the IP NAT is inside. It is the inside interface. And then let's interface S000, and then let's specify the interface as the outside interface for NAT. And then that's it. So we're done with the NAT configuration. So the next step is to configure, or where is it? There, we're already done with step two, the configuration of inside and outside interfaces. Then let's test the access with NAT. So let's go to PC1, okay? And let's try to ping the global address, okay? Take note that the server already has an identity, or a public identity. So let's ping uh, 64.100.50.1, and usually the first ping is the hello ping is always failing. Okay, it's okay now. PC1 was able to ping the server. So ping 64.100.50.1. So there you go. So it is successful now. And if you're going to look at the completion, it's already 100 over 100. But it's uh, instruction is not done yet. So let's just try to check everyone. So let's go to R1 and let's show run. There you go. So G00 is already configured as the inside interface, and S000 is configured as the outside interface. And down here, we have the IP NAT inside mapping, static mapping. And there you go. So that's how we do the activity. So thank you very much for listening.